The fluorescent lights of the barracks office buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Captain Reeves's face as he leaned across his desk. My uniform collar felt tight, sweat trickling down my spine despite the air conditioning. 29 years old, 8 years of service, and here I stood, a Marine sergeant being told my sacrifice wasn't enough. "Lawson," he said, voice cutting through the silence. "The unit's about to be evicted. Fix it with your savings. Now." My fists trembled behind my back where he couldn't see them. I thought about the $22,000 re-enlistment bonus I'd earned, money that had vanished to fund his nephew's fake training trip to Hawaii. I thought about the double shifts, the missed family visits, the sleep I'd sacrificed so my unit never went without. I lifted my hand into a crisp salute, eyes fixed forward, and my voice rang out clear as a blade. "Family? Remember?" The words hit him harder than any weapon could. His face paled, because he wasn't the only one hearing me. Behind us, the door creaked. General Robert Hayes stood there, his expression shifting from unreadable to thunderous as he processed what he'd just witnessed. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. That silence destroyed my commander's career and restored my honor. Camp Pendleton sprawled against the California coastline like a city unto itself, a maze of barracks, training grounds, and administration buildings where thousands of Marines lived and worked. I'd called it home for the past 4 years. The early morning sun cast long shadows as I jogged past the parade grounds, my boots pounding a steady rhythm on the pavement. Physical training had always been my escape, the one time when rank disappeared and there was only the burn in my muscles and the steady rhythm of my breathing. "Sergeant Lawson," a voice called from behind me. I slowed, turning to see Private Martinez struggling to catch up, her face flushed with exertion. "Sir," she panted, coming to attention. "Captain Reeves wants to see you, immediately." A knot formed in my stomach. Captain Douglas Reeves had taken command of our unit 6 months ago, and in that time, morale had plummeted. He was the kind of officer who remembered every mistake and forgot every achievement. "Did he say what it's about?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Something about your re-enlistment paperwork." "Sir." I nodded, dismissed her, and headed back to the barracks to shower and change. The re-enlistment had been my choice, a difficult one. 8 years in the Corps had cost me relationships, family time, and sometimes my peace of mind, but it had also given me purpose, structure, and a family of brothers and sisters who would die for each other. Plus, the $22,000 bonus wasn't insignificant. It represented freedom from the debt that had followed me since my father's medical bills piled up before his death. It meant finally being able to help my younger brother with college expenses. Maybe even start building something for myself. 30 minutes later, I stood outside Captain Reeves's office. My uniform crisp, my posture perfect. I knocked. "Enter." Captain Reeves sat behind his desk. A man in his early 40s with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. His office was immaculate, every award and commendation perfectly aligned on the wall behind him. "Sergeant Lawson," he said without looking up from the papers on his desk, "your re-enlistment bonus has been processed." "Yes, sir. I was informed it would be deposited this week." He finally looked up, a smile spreading across his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Plans for it?" "Paying off some debt, sir. Helping my brother with college." He nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Admirable. However, there's been a change of allocation." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Sir?" "The funds have been redirected to a specialized training initiative." He slid a folder across the desk. "As senior NCO, you should be aware of special deployments from our unit." I opened the folder. Inside was a travel authorization for Kyle Grant, Captain Reeves's nephew, a recruit who had barely made it through basic training. The destination, Honolulu, Hawaii. The purpose, specialized reconnaissance training. "Sir, with respect, Private Grant isn't qualified for..." "The decision's been made at command level, Lawson." His tone hardened. "The money's been allocated. It's done." My mind raced. This wasn't just unfair, it was corruption. But challenging a commanding officer directly wasn't just career suicide. It was against everything the Corps had taught me about respecting the chain of command. "May I ask why Private Grant was selected for this opportunity?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. Captain Reeves leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Let me make something clear, Sergeant. In this unit, there are 2 types of people, family and everyone else. Grant is family. You're everyone else." The words hit like a physical blow. 8 years of service, blood and sweat given to the Corps, and I was Everyone else? Is that understood, Sergeant? He asked, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Yes, sir. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Dismissed. I saluted and turned to leave, my mind numb with shock. And Lawson, he called as I reached for the door handle. I wouldn't discuss this matter outside this office. For your career's sake. That night, I sat on the edge of my bunk, staring at the bank statement on my phone. The bonus hadn't appeared. Instead of $22,546.78, my balance remained at $546.78, 8 years of service, and this was what it amounted to, being robbed by my commanding officer to send his nephew to Hawaii. My roommate, Corporal Diana Chen, noticed my expression. Bad news from home? I hesitated. Reeves's warning echoed in my head, but Chen and I had been through 2 deployments together. If there was anyone I could trust, it was her. The captain redirected my re-enlistment bonus to send his nephew on a training trip to Hawaii. Chen's eyes widened. That's not just unfair, Jess. That's illegal. He made it sound like it came from higher up, like it was official. Bullshit. Chen sat beside me. You should report it. I laughed bitterly. To who? He outranks almost everyone we deal with. And the ones he doesn't. I shook my head. He's connected. His family has been military for generations. So what are you going to do? I stared at the small photo taped to the wall beside my bunk. Me and my younger brother Sam at his high school graduation. I'd promised to help him with college. Another promise I couldn't keep. What can I do? I said finally. I follow orders. I do my job. Even when the orders are wrong? Chen's voice was quiet. I didn't have an answer for her. In training, everything was clear, right and wrong, black and white. But the real world operated in shades of gray. That night, I lay awake long after lights out, replaying Captain Reeves's words in my head. In this unit, there are 2 types of people, family and everyone else. What stung most wasn't the loss of the money, though that hurt plenty. It was the dismissal of my service, my sacrifice, my loyalty. In the Marines, we were taught that your unit was your family, that the person beside you was someone you'd die for without hesitation. Captain Reeves had taken that sacred bond and twisted it into something ugly, a justification for nepotism and theft. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, I made a decision. I wouldn't report him. Not yet. I'd watch. And wait. Document everything. Because sooner or later, men like Douglas Reeves made mistakes. And when he did, I'd be ready. What I didn't know then was how much worse things would get before that day came, or how high the price of justice would be. The weeks following that meeting changed everything. I watched helplessly as Kyle Grant's Instagram filled with photos of Hawaiian beaches, luxury, hotel rooms, and poolside cocktails, all tagged with Kaksha marine life and training hard. Each post was a reminder of what had been stolen from me, flaunted publicly without fear of consequences. Meanwhile, conditions in our barracks deteriorated. Maintenance requests went unanswered. Equipment broke down and wasn't replaced. The dining facility cut portions and quality, citing budget constraints. Through the Marine grapevine, I heard whispers of unpaid bills and diverted funds. Something's not right with the unit finances, Chen said one evening as we sat in the nearly empty rec room, its television long since broken. Williams and admin says they haven't paid the barracks utility bill in 3 months. How is that possible? I asked. Those funds come directly from command budget. Chen lowered her voice. Word is, Reeves has been redirecting maintenance funds for special training initiatives. More training, like his nephew's Hawaiian vacation, I thought bitterly. The men are starting to notice, I said, looking around at the peeling paint and broken furniture. Morale's at rock bottom. Not just morale. Rodriguez found black mold in the West Wing showers. Morales has been sleeping in his car because his room ceiling leaks every time it rains. This isn't just about comfort, Jess. It's getting dangerous. I thought about my squad. 18 men and women who depended on me to advocate for their well-being. I'd been avoiding Reeves since our confrontation, focusing on training and keeping my head down. But I couldn't ignore this. I'll talk to him, I said finally. Next morning, I requested a meeting with Captain Reeves. His secretary, a civilian contractor who regarded us enlisted personnel with thinly veiled contempt, informed me he was too busy to see me. It's regarding barracks conditions, ma'am, I insisted. It's becoming a health hazard. She sighed dramatically. I'll add you to his calendar for next week. Next week isn't good enough. We have black mold, leaking ceilings, Is there a problem, Sergeant Lawson? I turned to find Captain Reeves standing in the doorway to his office, watching me with cold eyes. Sir, I need to discuss the barracks conditions with you. We have several maintenance issues that require immediate attention. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Come in. Once inside his office, I laid out the problems systematically. The mold, the leaks, the broken facilities. I had documentation, including photos Chen had taken, and a list of affected rooms and personnel. And what exactly do you expect me to do about this, Sergeant? He asked when I finished. Request emergency maintenance funds, sir. These conditions are hazardous to the health and readiness of our Marines. Emergency funds. He repeated the words slowly. And where do you suggest I find these emergency funds? Sir, with respect, that's not my area of expertise, but these issues need addressing before someone gets seriously ill. He leaned back in his chair, regarding me with what almost seemed like amusement. Let me explain our situation, Sergeant. The unit is operating under severe budget constraints. Every penny is allocated. Training, operations, maintenance. If we divert funds to barracks repairs, something else suffers. Sir, these aren't cosmetic issues. This is basic habitability. I'm aware. His tone hardened. But decisions have been made at levels above your pay grade. Unless you have a solution to offer, this conversation is pointless. I hesitated, sensing a trap, but unable to see it clearly. What kind of solution, sir? Financial. He smiled thinly. I understand you're quite the saver, Lawson. Always sending money home, living frugally on base. The implication hung in the air between us, so outrageous I almost laughed. He wasn't just suggesting. He was expecting me to use my personal funds to fix problems his mismanagement had created. Sir, are you asking me to personally finance, barracks repairs? I'm asking if you care about the welfare of your Marines as much as you claim to. His eyes were hard. Sometimes leadership requires sacrifice. With all due respect, sir, this isn't about my willingness to sacrifice. This is about proper allocation of unit funds. Funds that should be available. He stood abruptly. Dismissed, Sergeant. I'll consider your concerns. But nothing changed. If anything, conditions worsened. The next week, the electricity in the West Wing went out for 36 hours. The week after that, the water was shut off for maintenance that never seemed to happen. Then came the notice. Not through official channels, but through a civilian contractor who took pity on us. The barracks management company was initiating eviction proceedings due to non-payment. Within 30 days, we would be without housing. When I brought this to Reeves, his response was unexpected. I'm aware of the situation, Sergeant. I've been working on a solution. He seemed almost pleased. In fact, I've arranged for temporary funds to cover the immediate shortfall. Relief washed through me. That's excellent news, sir. There's just one small detail to finalize. He smiled. The transfer requires a guarantor, someone with good credit and, he paused meaningfully, available funds. And there it was, the trap I'd sensed earlier, now sprung. You want me to be the guarantor? I said flatly. Your financial responsibility is well documented, Sergeant Lawson. Your credit score is exemplary, and I know you care deeply about your Marines. How much? The words felt like ashes in my mouth. 18,000. He said it casually, as if it were pocket change. Just until the next fiscal quarter when our budget refreshes. $18,000. Almost the exact amount of my stolen bonus. Money I didn't have anymore. Money that was funding his nephew's Hawaiian vacation. And if I refuse? His expression hardened. Then I'll be forced to document your insubordination and unwillingness to support unit readiness, which would be unfortunate for your future in the Corps. The threat was clear. My career for his corruption. I'll need time to consider, I managed. You have until tomorrow morning. Oh, 800 hours. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. That night, I paced the length of the barracks roof, the cool evening air doing nothing to calm my fury. Chen found me there, her expression grim. He wants me to cover the barracks debt, I told her without preamble. $18,000. She swore under her breath. That's almost exactly the amount of my bonus. Yeah. What are you going to do? I stared out at the lights of Camp Pendleton, stretching toward the distant ocean. I don't know. I don't have that kind of money anymore. Even if you did, Chen said fiercely, this is wrong, Jess. It's corruption, plain and simple. If I refuse, he'll tank my career. If I can't pay, we lose the barracks. I ran a hand through my short hair. He's backed me into a corner. Chen was quiet for a long moment. There might be another way. What? General Hayes is conducting a command inspection next week. Word is, he's a stickler for proper procedure. Zero tolerance for financial irregularities. Hope flared briefly, then died. Reeves will make sure Hayes only sees what he wants him to see. That's how these inspections work. Not always. Chen's expression was determined. Not if someone makes sure the general sees the truth. Morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through options that all led to the same dead end. By the time I showered and dressed, my decision was made. Not because I'd found a good solution, but because time had run out. At precisely 800 hours, I stood before Captain Reeves's desk, my posture perfect, my expression carefully neutral. Well, Sergeant Lawson, have you made your decision? He leaned back in his chair, confidence radiating from every pore. Men like Douglas Reeves weren't accustomed to hearing no. Sir, I don't have $18,000. The words were simple, factual. His smile faded. I find that hard to believe, Sergeant. Your frugality is well known. I had planned to use my re-enlistment bonus to pay off debts and help my brother with college. That money is no longer available to me. I met his gaze steadily, the unspoken accusation hanging between us. Are you implying something, Sergeant? His voice dropped dangerously. No, sir, simply stating facts. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed theatrically. I'm disappointed, Lawson. I thought you cared more about your Marines. I do care, sir, which is why I've documented all barracks deficiencies and included them in my weekly reports for the past month. Kept my tone professional, giving nothing away. I've also noted all maintenance requests that were submitted and denied. A flicker of unease crossed his face. Those reports are internal, Sergeant. They don't leave this office. Copies are maintained in unit records, sir. As per protocol. His expression hardened. Are you threatening me, Lawson? No, sir, I'm following procedure, as we all should. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. For a moment, I thought he might explode. His face had reddened, a vein pulsing at his temple. But then he regained control, his features settling into a cold mask. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I tried to give you an opportunity to be part of the solution. Now you'll be part of the problem. Is there anything else, sir? He waved a dismissive hand. Get out of my office. I saluted, turned, and left, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd just declared war on my commanding officer. There was no going back now. The fallout was immediate. By afternoon, I'd been reassigned from squad leader to inventory duty, counting supplies in the warehouse, a job typically reserved for Marines on disciplinary action. My security clearance was under review, limiting my access to certain areas of the base. My leave request to attend my brother's college graduation was denied due to operational needs. Chen found me in the warehouse that evening, surrounded by crates of MREs I was supposed to be cataloging. He's moving fast, she said, looking around to ensure we were alone. William says he's building a case against you, performance issues, insubordination, the works. I'm not surprised. I closed my inventory clipboard. He can't let this stand. If I won't pay, I have to be discredited before I can cause problems. General Hayes arrives Monday. Chen lowered her voice. That gives us 4 days to gather everything we need. Us? I raised an eyebrow. Chen, this is my fight. I can't ask you to risk your career too. She fixed me with a stern look. First, you're not asking, I'm telling. Second, this stopped being about just you when he let the barracks fall apart. We're all suffering for his corruption. I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it nearly brought tears to my eyes. In the Corps, we talked about brotherhood and sisterhood, the bonds that went beyond blood. In that moment, I felt it, deeper than ever before. We need to be careful, I said. Reeves has friends in high places. So do we. Chen smiled grimly. Rodriguez, Morales, Williams, they're all with us. Even Parker from admin. Parker? She works directly for Reeves. And she's seen every piece of paperwork he's pushed through, including the special training authorizations. Hope, dangerous and fragile, began to build. In my chest. What's the plan? Document everything. Every leaky ceiling, every mold spot, every broken fixture. Get statements from Marines affected by the conditions. And most importantly, follow the money. We need to trace how the barracks maintenance funds were diverted. That won't be easy, I warned. Reeves won't have left an obvious paper trail. No, but his nephew has left a digital one. Chen pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. Every post is time-stamped and geotagged. Five-star hotels don't come cheap. There will be receipts, credit card statements. Those are personal records. We can't access them. We don't need to. She scrolled through Kyle's feed. Look, he's tagged the hotels, restaurants, even the helicopter tour company. All we need to do is estimate costs. Based on public information, then match the timeline to when funds disappeared from our budget. It was circumstantial, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than helpless rage. I felt purpose. The next 4 days were a blur of covert activity. During the day, I performed my inventory duties with meticulous attention, giving Reeves no ammunition to use against me. At night, our small resistance movement gathered evidence. Rodriguez and Morales documented every barracks deficiency, building a comprehensive case file that showed systematic neglect. Williams quietly copied maintenance requests and denial forms. Parker, risking the most, provided copies of budget transfers that showed maintenance funds being reclassified as specialized training allocations. And Chen, brilliant Chen, built a timeline correlating Kyle Grant's Instagram posts with the budget transfers, estimating that his Hawaiian training had cost approximately $22,000, the exact amount of my re-enlistment bonus. By Sunday night, we had assembled a damning case file. But there was still one critical problem: how to get it into General Hayes' hands without Reeves intercepting it. He'll be touring the barracks tomorrow morning, Chen said as we sat in my room surrounded by our evidence. Reeves will guide him through the East Wing where conditions are still decent. We need to make sure he sees the West Wing, I said. That's where the worst of it is. Reeves has already issued orders. All personnel are to remain in their duty stations during the inspection. He doesn't want any of us talking to the general. I thought for a moment, then looked up at her with sudden clarity. We don't need to talk to him. We just need him to see the truth. The next morning, I reported for inventory duty as ordered, my heart racing with nervous energy. Our plan was simple but risky. If it worked, Reeves would be exposed. If it failed, my career was over. At 1,000 hours exactly, General Robert Hayes arrived at Camp Pendleton. From my position in the warehouse, I could see his motorcade pull up to headquarters, where Captain Reeves would be waiting to greet him. I checked my watch. Right on schedule. At 10:15, Rodriguez executed the first part of our plan, a carefully timed maintenance emergency in the East Wing bathrooms. Nothing dangerous, just enough flooding to require immediate attention and render that section of the barracks unsuitable for inspection. At 10:30, my phone vibrated with a text from Chen. They're heading to the West Wing. Reeves looks furious. Our trap was set. Throughout the West Wing, we'd placed our evidence in plain sight. Photographs of the conditions alongside maintenance requests that had been denied. Budget documents showing the diverted power funds and printouts of Kyle Grant's Hawaiian adventure, complete with cost estimates. But the centerpiece waited in room 237, my former squad room, now housing some of the worst mold damage on base. There, pinned to the wall above a bed soaked from ceiling leaks, was a complete timeline: my re-enlistment bonus, its diversion to special training, Kyle's Instagram posts, and the simultaneous deterioration of the barracks. At 10:45, I received another text. 2:37. Now. I abandoned my inventory and moved quickly across the base, my heart thundering in my chest. This wasn't just about my bonus anymore. It was about every Marine who had suffered under Reeves's corruption. It was about the sacred trust between leaders and those they commanded, a trust he had broken for personal gain. I arrived at the barracks just as General Hayes emerged from room 237, his expression thunderous. Behind him, Captain Reeves had gone deathly pale, his eyes darting frantically as he tried to explain away what the general had just seen. Unfortunate conditions, sir, which I've been working to address despite budget constraints. Budget constraints? General Hayes' voice cut through Reeves's excuses. Like a knife. According to these documents, you received full allocation for barracks maintenance last quarter. Where did that money go, Captain? Sir, there were unexpected operational expenses. Like your nephew's trip to Hawaii? The general held up one of the Instagram printouts. Is this what the Marine Corps is paying for now, Reeves? 5-star resorts for untrained privates? Reeves saw me then, standing at attention at the end of the hallway. His eyes narrowed with hate. Sir, I can explain everything. But first, I need to address an urgent matter with Sergeant Lawson. General Hayes turned, noticing me for the first time. Sergeant, approach. I moved forward, saluting crisply. Sir, yes, sir. Are you familiar with these documents? He gestured to the file in his hand. Yes, sir. And can you verify their authenticity? I met Reeves's gaze directly for the first time in weeks. Every document in that file can be independently verified, sir. She's lying, Reeves hissed. She's been insubordinate, disruptive. Silence, Captain. General Hayes's voice was quiet but carried the full weight of his authority. Sergeant, I understand there was an issue with your re-enlistment bonus. Yes, sir. It was redirected to fund a specialized training initiative for Private Kyle Grant. The general's voice was flat. Yes, sir. Captain Reeves' nephew. Yes, sir. General Hayes turned back to Reeves, whose face had now taken on an ashen quality. My office has been investigating financial irregularities in several units, Captain. Yours was next on my list. It seems I should have started here. Sir, I can explain everything. I'm sure you'll have ample opportunity to explain, Captain. To me, to the JAG office, and possibly to a court-martial board. The corridor had gone deadly quiet. Every Marine within earshot stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe as they witnessed their commanding officer's downfall. For now, General Hayes continued, you are relieved of command, effective immediately. Report to my office at 1400 hours with your commanding officer. Sir, Reeves began, but the look the general gave him silenced any further protest. Dismissed, Captain. Reeves saluted stiffly, shot me one last venomous glare, and stalked away. Only when he had disappeared from sight did I allow myself to breathe again. Sergeant Lawson, General Hayes said, turning to me, I'd like you to gather whoever helped compile this evidence. My office, 1300 hours. Yes, sir. As he walked away, I felt a curious lightness. Not triumph, not vindication, but the simple relief of truth finally seeing the light of day. The following week passed in a blur of interviews, statements, and investigations. Captain Reeves was officially suspended pending an inquiry, his access to base restricted, his authority stripped. Lieutenant Colonel Morris, the battalion executive officer, assumed temporary command of our unit. The barracks situation improved almost overnight. Emergency maintenance funds were approved. Contractors swarmed through the buildings, fixing leaks, treating mold, and repairing broken facilities. For the first time in months, Marines could shower without dodging dripping ceilings or sleep without the smell of mildew. Chen, Rodriguez, Morales, Williams, Parker, all those who had risked their careers to expose the truth, were called to testify but faced no repercussions. General Hayes had made it clear there would be no retaliation against whistleblowers on his watch. As for me, I was restored to my position as squad leader, but found myself increasingly pulled into meetings with senior officers and investigators. The case against Reeves was building rapidly, extending beyond the barracks issues and my bonus. It seemed he had been skimming from various accounts for years, protected by family connections and his ability to intimidate subordinates. 9 days after General Hayes's inspection, I was summoned to his office. Unlike the opulent space Reeves had maintained, Hayes's office was Spartanly functional. Awards and commendations on the walls, but no unnecessary luxuries. Sit down, Sergeant Lawson, he said when I reported. I sat, back straight, wondering why I'd been called. The investigation was proceeding without needing further input from me. I've reviewed your service record, Hayes began, studying a file on his desk. 8 years of exemplary service, 2 combat deployments, consistently high-performance evaluations. He looked up. Until Captain Reeves took command. Yes, sir. He claims you became insubordinate, disruptive to unit cohesion. I remained silent, knowing better than to speak ill of a superior officer, even one facing criminal charges. Hayes smiled slightly at my discretion. Your silence speaks volumes, Sergeant. However, I'm more interested in the reports from your previous commanders. He tapped the file. Lieutenant Colonel Winters described you as the backbone of her platoon. Captain Hernandez wrote that you showed exceptional leadership potential. They were generous in their assessments, sir. I don't think so. Hayes leaned back in his chair. I think they saw what I'm seeing now, a Marine who understands that leadership isn't about rank, it's about integrity. I shifted uncomfortably under his praise. Sir, I just did what any Marine should have done. But they didn't, did they? His gaze was penetrating. Others saw what was happening but stayed silent. You acted. That matters, Sergeant. I had help, sir. I couldn't have done it alone. Yes. Corporal Chen, Private Rodriguez, and the others. They'll all receive commendations. He paused. But they followed your lead, Lawson. That's what leaders do. They inspire others to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I remained silent. There's the matter of your re-enlistment bonus, Hayes continued. The investigation has confirmed it. Was improperly diverted. You'll receive full restitution, plus interest. Relief washed through me. The money wouldn't solve everything, but it would allow me to keep my promise to my brother. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. It's what you're owed. He closed the file. There's something else we need to discuss. Your future in the Corps. My stomach tightened. Despite everything, I loved being a Marine. The thought of losing that identity terrified me. Sir, you're eligible for Officer Candidate School, Lawson. Your test scores are well above the threshold, and you've demonstrated the leadership qualities we look for. Have you ever considered becoming an officer? The question caught me completely off guard. Briefly, sir. Early in my enlistment, but I decided I could serve best as an NCO, working directly with the Marines. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. A noble choice. But leadership takes many forms, Sergeant. Sometimes it means staying in the trenches with your people. Other times, it means putting yourself in a position where you can create systemic change. He leaned forward. The Corps needs officers who understand what it means to serve in the ranks, who've felt the impact of both good and bad leadership. Are you suggesting I apply for OCS, sir? I'm doing more than suggesting. I'm offering to sponsor your application. He held up a hand as I started to speak. Don't answer now. Think about it. Talk to your family, your fellow Marines. This is a major decision. Yes, sir. My mind was reeling. One more thing, Sergeant. His expression grew serious. Captain Reeves will likely face court-martial. You'll be called to testify. I understand, sir. It won't be pleasant. His family has connections. They'll fight back, try to discredit you, paint this as a personal vendetta. I straightened in my chair. Let them try, sir. The truth is on our side. He studied me for a moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied by what he saw. You're dismissed. Sergeant, and Lawson, he added as I stood to leave. Well done. I saluted and left his office, my emotions a complex tangle of vindication, relief, and uncertainty about the future. As I walked across the parade grounds, I spotted Chen waiting near the flagpole, her expression anxious. What happened? She asked as I approached. Reeves is definitely facing court-martial. We'll all have to testify. I paused, still processing the rest. And Hayes offered to sponsor me for OCS. Chen's eyes widened. Holy shit, Jess, that's huge. Are you going to do it? I don't know. I looked around at Camp Pendleton. The barracks, the training grounds, the young Marines going about their duties. I never saw myself as an officer. Maybe that's exactly why you should be one, Chen said quietly. The best leaders are often those who never sought power in the first place. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Sam, my brother. Got your letter? What do you mean you can help with tuition now? What happened? I smiled, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. At least one promise I could keep. Come on, I said to Chen. I owe you a beer. Several, actually. Damn right you do, she grinned. I risked my ass for your moral crusade. Our moral crusade, I corrected her. As we walked toward the base exit, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The fight wasn't over. Reeves's court-martial loomed, and my decision about OCS weighed heavily. But for the first time in months, I was walking in the sunlight, head held high. I thought about Captain Reeves's words, delivered with such casual cruelty. In this unit, there are two types of people, family and everyone else. He'd been right about one thing. The Marine Corps was a family, but he'd fundamentally misunderstood what that meant. It wasn't about blood relations or nepotism or protecting your own at the expense of others. It was about standing together, having each other's, backs, upholding a code that placed honor and integrity above all else. In trying to diminish me, Reeves had inadvertently reminded me of what mattered most. Not rank, not money, but the courage to stand up for what was right, even when standing alone. Except I hadn't been alone. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The Marine Corps courtroom was austere. Polished wooden benches, the corpse emblem mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench, and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in harsh clarity. I sat ramrod straight in my dress blues, hands folded in my lap, waiting to be called. 3 months had passed since General Hayes's inspection. 3 months of depositions, evidence reviews, and preparation for this day. Captain Douglas Reeves, decorated officer and scion of a Military family was facing court-martial on charges of misappropriation of funds, abuse of power, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Outside the courtroom, life had moved forward. The barracks renovations were complete, my re-enlistment bonus had been restored with interest, and Sam was thriving in his second year of college. I'd submitted my application for officer candidate school with General Hayes's sponsorship, though the decision was still pending. But here, in this room, time seemed suspended. The past wasn't finished with us yet. The prosecution calls Sergeant Jessica Lawson, announced Major Rivera, the JAG prosecutor. I rose, moved to the witness stand, and was sworn in. As I sat, I allowed myself a brief glance at Reeves. He sat beside his defense counsel in his dress uniform, ribbons and medals gleaming under the lights. His expression was controlled, but his eyes burned with hatred when they met mine. Sergeant Lawson, Major Rivera began, please describe for the court your role in the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines during Captain Reeves's command. I served as squad leader for 3rd Squad, Bravo Company. I replied, my voice steady. I was responsible for 18 Marines and their readiness, training, and welfare. And when did you re-enlist? January 15th of this year, sir. What was your understanding regarding your re-enlistment bonus? I explained the bonus structure, the amount, $22,000, and my plans for it. Major Rivera led me methodically through the events. My meeting with Reeves, the redirection of funds to his nephew's training, the deteriorating barracks conditions, and finally, the confrontation over the eviction notice. Throughout my testimony, I remained professional, stating facts without embellishment. The evidence spoke for itself. The paper trail, the Instagram posts, the maintenance requests, all presented as exhibits. Sergeant Lawson, Major Rivera said finally, in your 8 years of service, had you ever witnessed similar conduct from a commanding officer? No, sir. No further questions. Reeves's defense counsel rose, a civilian attorney in an expensive suit, hired by his family. Mr. Whitford approached with a predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sergeant Lawson, isn't it true that you had personal animosity toward Captain Reeves before the incident with your bonus? No, sir. Really? Your performance reviews declined after he took command. Might that have created some resentment? My performance didn't change, sir. The evaluation standards did. Whitford's smile tightened. You organized a coordinated effort to undermine your commanding officer. Some might call that mutiny, Sergeant. Major Rivera stood immediately. Objection. Argumentative and mischaracterizes the facts. The witness documented legitimate concerns through proper channels. Sustained. The judge said firmly. Counsel, refrain from characterizing the witness's actions. Whitford nodded, barely acknowledging the rebuke. Sergeant Lawson, isn't it possible that the reallocation of your bonus was a legitimate command decision based on training priorities you weren't privy to? Private grants, activities in Hawaii included parasailing, luxury spa treatments, and poolside cocktails, I replied evenly. If those constitute Marine Corps training priorities, sir, then I've misunderstood my 8 years of service. A ripple of suppressed laughter moved through the courtroom. Whitford's expression hardened. You've been offered sponsorship for officer candidate school by General Hayes, the same officer overseeing this investigation. Isn't that a significant personal benefit resulting from your actions against Captain Reeves? I met his gaze steadily. The offer came after the investigation confirmed Captain Reeves's misconduct. I neither expected nor requested it. But you accepted it. I submitted an application, yes. The decision is still pending. Whitford changed tactics. Sergeant Lawson, you've testified that Captain Reeves told you, in this unit, there are 2 types of people, family and everyone else. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And you interpreted this as referring to nepotism? He made the statement while explaining why his nephew received specialized training in Hawaii funded by my bonus. The meaning seemed clear. Or perhaps he was speaking metaphorically about loyalty to the unit. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted his words due to your disappointment over the bonus? I considered my answer carefully. Sir, in the Marine Corps, we're trained to understand both explicit and implicit orders. When a commanding officer says everyone else while denying you resources and benefits given to his blood relative, the message is unmistakable. Whitford's questioning continued for another hour, attempting to paint me as disgruntled, ambitious, vindictive, anything to undermine my credibility. But the facts remained immovable. The paper trail didn't lie. Kyle Grant's Instagram didn't lie. The moldy barracks didn't lie. When I was finally dismissed, I felt drained but unbowed. One by one, my fellow witnesses took the stand. Chen, Rodriguez, Williams, Parker. Each told their part of the story, building an unassailable wall of evidence against Reeves. The most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Kyle Grant himself, subpoenaed to appear. The young private looked nothing like the confident figure from his Instagram posts, as he nervously described how his uncle had arranged his training mission to Hawaii, complete with spending money and instructions to enjoy yourself, but keep it quiet. By the time the prosecution rested, the outcome seemed inevitable. Reeves's defense offered character witnesses, fellow officers who spoke of his dedication and family legacy, but they couldn't counter the mountain of evidence against him. The court-martial board deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning their verdict: guilty on all charges. For sentencing, I was asked to provide a victim impact statement. I stood before the board, acutely aware of Reeves watching me, his future hanging on what I might say. 8 years ago, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I began. I pledged to obey the orders of those appointed over me. That oath has guided every decision I've made as a Marine. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Captain Reeves broke his oath. He placed personal gain above the welfare of his Marines. He abused his authority and betrayed the trust placed in him. The impact wasn't just financial, though the loss of my bonus meant my brother almost had to leave college. The true damage was to the bond that makes the Marine Corps what it is, the knowledge that we take care of our own. I looked directly at Reeves for the first time. Despite that, I don't seek vengeance. What I want is for every Marine under Captain Reeves's command to see that the system works. That rank doesn't place anyone above accountability. That's the impact that matters, restoring faith in the Corps and its values. The board sentenced Reeves to dismissal from service, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and 6 months confinement. As the verdict was read, I watched his face crumple, the reality of his fall from grace finally sinking in. The proud officer, the scion of a military dynasty, was now a convicted criminal. I felt no joy in his downfall, only a somber satisfaction that justice had been served. As I left the courtroom, General Hayes was waiting in the corridor. "Well done, Sergeant," he said quietly. "That couldn't have been easy." "No, sir," I admitted. "It wasn't. Your OCS application has been approved," he continued. "You report in 6 weeks." The news hit me with unexpected force. Despite applying, part of me had never truly believed I would be selected, that an enlisted Marine who had testified against an officer would be welcomed into their ranks. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored." He nodded. "The Corps is changing, Lawson. Slowly, perhaps, but changing nonetheless. We need leaders who understand that honor isn't inherited. It's earned through actions." He extended his hand. "Officers like you." I shook his hand, emotion tightening my throat. "I'll do my best, sir." "I know you will." He smiled slightly. "That's why I recommended you." That evening, Chen organized an impromptu celebration at a bar just off base. Rodriguez, Morales, Williams, Parker, all those who had stood with me, gathered to toast the verdict and my OCS acceptance. "To Justice Lawson," Chen declared, raising her glass. "Future terror of officer country." Laughter and cheers erupted around the table. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the beer in my hand and everything to do with the people surrounding me. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," I told them, my voice thick with emotion. "You all risked everything to stand up for what's right." "You showed us how," Rodriguez said simply. Later, as the celebration wound down, I stepped outside to call Sam and share the news about OCS. The night air was cool, stars visible above the glow of city lights. "That's amazing, Jess," my brother exclaimed when I told him. "Lieutenant Lawson has a nice ring to it." "It's going to be a long road," I cautioned. "OCS isn't easy." "Neither was standing up to Reeves," Sam pointed out. "But you did it anyway, because it was right." As we talked, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. From the humiliation of that first meeting with Reeves to the vindication of the court-martial. What had begun as a personal injustice had evolved into something larger, a test of character, of conviction, of courage. I thought about Reeves's words again, family and everyone else, and how profoundly he had misunderstood the concept. The men and women who had stood beside me through this ordeal weren't blood relatives. They were something more profound, people bound by shared values and mutual respect, willing to risk their own security for principles they believed in. That was family. That was the Marine Corps at its best. When I hung up with Sam, Chen was waiting by the door. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. Yeah, everything's good. And for the first time in many months, I truly believed it. Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia, was everything I'd been warned about and more. Physically grueling, mentally exhausting, and constantly challenging. From the moment I arrived, the instructors made it clear. My enlisted experience meant nothing here. I was just another candidate expected to prove myself from scratch. The 10-week program stripped us down and rebuilt us. Endless physical training, classroom instruction, leadership scenarios, and evaluations. We marched until our feet blistered, studied until our eyes burned, and practiced drill movements until they became second nature. I was older than most candidates, many of whom had come straight from college. At 29, with 8 years of service behind me, I sometimes felt ancient among them. But my experience also gave me advantages. I understood military culture, could anticipate expectations, and had already developed the mental toughness needed to endure hardship. What surprised me most was how the Reeves case followed me. I hadn't spoken publicly about it, but military news travels fast. Some instructors watched me with added scrutiny, perhaps wondering if I was a troublemaker. Others seemed to hold me to a higher standard, as if my willingness to challenge authority required extra proving of my commitment to the chain of command. My fellow candidates were equally divided. Some admired what I'd done, seeing it as a stand for integrity. Others kept their distance, uncertain about associating with someone who had testified against an officer. "You're the one who took down that captain, right?" a candidate named Peterson asked during our 3rd week, as we cleaned the barracks together. I reported misconduct, I corrected carefully. The investigation and court-martial did the rest. He nodded thoughtfully. "My dad's an officer. Says there are unwritten rules about that kind of thing." "There are unwritten rules about lots of things," I replied, continuing to mop. "Doesn't make them right." Peterson studied me for a moment. "Must have been hard, though." I thought about the months of stress, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of retaliation. It was, but not as hard as watching good Marines suffer because of one man's corruption. He nodded again, then changed the subject. But something shifted after that conversation. Word spread, and gradually, the wariness surrounding me began to dissolve. By the halfway point of OCS, I'd found my place, not as the whistleblower, but as Candidate Lawson, reliable under pressure and willing to help others through the challenges. Week 8 brought the culminating field exercise, a grueling multi-day evolution testing everything we'd learned. We operated on minimal sleep, navigating tactically through the Virginia woods, completing complex missions under simulated combat conditions. Leadership roles rotated among us, each candidate evaluated on their ability to make decisions and lead effectively under pressure. During one-night operation, with rain pouring down and visibility near zero, I was assigned as squad leader. Our mission: locate an enemy position, gather intelligence, and extract without detection. Everything went wrong almost immediately. Our navigation was off, placing us kilometers from our intended position. One candidate sprained an ankle crossing a stream. Our communications equipment malfunctioned in the downpour. Standing there in the darkness, soaked to the skin, with 11 exhausted candidates looking to me for our direction, I felt a moment of crushing doubt. This wasn't like leading Marines I'd trained with for months. These were peers, many with less experience, all struggling. Then I remembered something Chen had said months earlier. The best leaders are often those who never sought power in the first place. I gathered the squad close. "Here's our situation," I said quietly. "We're off course, injured, and out of comms. Standard protocol says abort the mission, signal for extraction." They nodded, relief visible on their mud-streaked faces. "But," I continued, "this isn't just about completing the mission. It's about how we handle adversity. We have a map, compasses, and our training. We can still accomplish this." I laid out a revised plan, relocating ourselves on the map, splitting duties to accommodate our injured member, and establishing alternate communication protocols. It wasn't complex or brilliant, just practical problem-solving drawn from years of field experience. "Questions?" I asked. Peterson spoke up. "What if we fail anyway?" "Then we fail giving our best effort," I replied, "and we learn from it. That's what officers do. They make the best decisions possible with the information available, then take responsibility for the outcome." Something changed in their expressions, a new resolve forming. One by one, they nodded, ready to continue despite exhaustion and discomfort. We completed the mission. Not perfectly, not easily, but we accomplished our objectives and extracted safely. The instructors were sparing with praise, but their evaluations noted our adaptability and perseverance under adverse conditions. 2 weeks later, I stood on the parade ground with my fellow candidates as we received our commissions. The weight of the second lieutenant's bars on my shoulders felt strange after years of sergeant stripes. My brother Sam stood in the audience, beaming with pride. Beside him, to my surprise, was Corporal Chen, who had taken leave to attend. General Hayes presented my commission personally, a rare honor. As he pinned on my bars, he spoke quietly, for my ears alone. Remember why you're here, Lieutenant Lawson. Not because you followed orders blindly, but because you understood what those orders should serve. Yes, sir, I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. Later at the reception, Sam hugged me fiercely. Mom and Dad would have been so proud, he whispered. I hope so, I said, thinking of our parents. My father, who had died of cancer when Sam was still in high school. My mother, who had followed 3 years later. Their absence was a persistent ache on milestone days like this. Chen approached, snapping a perfect salute that I returned with a smile. Permission to speak freely, Lieutenant? She asked with mock formality. Always, Corporal, she grinned. Don't let those shiny new bars go to your head. Never, I laughed. How are things at Pendleton? Better. Lieutenant Colonel Morris is permanent CO now. He's good, fair, transparent about finances. The barracks passed inspection with flying colors last month. And the others? Rodriguez? Morales? All good. Rodriguez made corporal. Morales is applying to the Naval Academy. Pride swelled in my chest. One stand for integrity had created ripples, inspiring others to reach higher, to believe in the system's capacity for justice. What about you? I asked. Any thoughts about OCS? Chen shook her head. I'm happy where I am. For now, anyway. She smiled. Someone has to keep the lieutenants in line. After the ceremony, I received my first duty assignment, Weapons Company Executive Officer at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. A challenging position for a new officer, but one that played to my strengths and experience. The night before I left for Lejeune, I sat alone in my temporary quarters, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The face looking back was the same eyes, same determined expression, but the uniform had changed. The responsibility had changed. I thought about the journey from that office at Camp Pendleton, standing before Reeves as he demanded my savings to cover his misappropriation, to this moment, commissioned as an officer, entrusted with leading Marines. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a news article link with a brief message. Thought you should see this. The article was from the Marine Corps Times. Former Marine captain sentenced in corruption case released early. Douglas Reeves had served only 3 months of his 6-month sentence due to good behavior and mitigating circumstances. I stared at the screen, a familiar anger stirring. After everything he'd done, after all the harm he'd caused, he was walking free early. The system I'd fought to uphold still bent for men with connections. For a moment, the victory I'd felt seemed hollow, the changes I'd hoped to bring insignificant against the entrenched power structures that protected their own. Then my phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. But he's still dismissed from service, pension gone, career over. The truth won, you won. I recognized the style then. Williams. From admin, always direct, always keeping perspective. She was right. Reeves had lost everything that mattered to him, his rank, his career, his family's military legacy. The system wasn't perfect, but it had worked where it counted most. I texted back a simple thank you and set my phone aside. Tomorrow I would travel to Camp Lejeune, where Marines who didn't know me or my history would be looking to me for leadership. They wouldn't care about what I'd done at Pendleton or how I'd earned my commission. They would judge me by my actions, my decisions, my integrity. That was the challenge now. Not fighting old battles, but building something better for those under my command. Ensuring they never faced the choices I had to make. Creating a unit where family meant everyone, not just the privileged few. As I packed my belongings, I tucked away the copy of my court testimony, a reminder of where I'd come from and why it mattered. But I placed my new officer's manual on top, a symbol of where I was going and what I could become. The fight against Reeves had defined one chapter of my life, but it wouldn't define my career or my future. That story was still being written, one decision at a time. 3 years passed like a whirlwind. My assignment as executive officer at Camp Lejeune expanded my understanding of leadership beyond anything I'd experienced as an enlisted Marine. I learned to balance paperwork with people, regulations with reality, and discipline with compassion. I made mistakes, plenty of them, but never the kind Reeves had made. I kept my integrity intact, even when it would have been easier to bend. My promotion to first lieutenant came on schedule, followed 18 months later by captain's bars. The irony wasn't lost on me. I now held the same rank Reeves had when I confronted him, but I wore it differently, determined to be the kind of officer I'd needed when I was a sergeant. Now, at 32, I stood on the tarmac at Camp Pendleton, watching Marines disembark from transport vehicles. My Marines. I'd been assigned as company commander of Bravo Company 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, the very unit where my confrontation with Reeves had occurred 3 years earlier. "Welcome back, Captain Lawson," Lieutenant Colonel Harris greeted me with a firm handshake. "Your reputation precedes you." "I hope that's a good thing, sir," I replied with a small smile. "Depends who you ask," he said, but his eyes were warm. "Most say you're tough but fair. Some say you're too invested in the welfare of enlisted personnel. I consider that an asset, not a liability." "Thank you, sir." As we walked toward headquarters, he briefed me on the state of Bravo Company, 175 Marines ranging from fresh-faced privates to seasoned staff, sergeants. Their previous commander had retired after 20 years of service, leaving behind a solid unit with good fundamentals. "They need leadership more than fixing," Harris concluded. "Challenge them, inspire them, make them better than they think they can be." "I'll do my best, sir." "I know you will." He paused outside headquarters. "One more thing, Lawson. What happened here before, with Reeves, it's still remembered. There are some who see you as a hero for standing up to corruption. Others see you as someone who broke the code by testifying against an officer." "I'm aware, sir." "Good. Just remember, you're not here to prove anything about the past. You're here to lead these Marines into the future." He extended his hand again. "Make me proud, Captain." "Yes, sir." My first week. Commanding Bravo Company was a crash course in everything OCS hadn't fully prepared me for. The sheer volume of decisions, the constant demands on my time and attention, the weight of responsibility for not just the mission but the lives and well-being of nearly 200 people. I relied heavily on my first sergeant, a grizzled veteran named Ortiz with 22 years of service. He knew the corps inside and out, had seen commanders come and go, and possessed the uncanny ability to anticipate problems before they materialized. "Permission to speak freely, Captain?" he asked during our first private meeting. "Always, First Sergeant. The men know who you are. The Reeves case is part of Corps lore now, taught in leadership courses as a case study in ethical failure." I nodded, unsurprised. And they're wondering if you're here to make a point, if you've got something to prove. "I'm here to lead a company, First Sergeant. Nothing more, nothing less." He studied me carefully. "Good answer, ma'am. But it'll take more than words to convince some of them." He was right. I could feel the scrutiny in every interaction. My orders analyzed for hidden meaning, my decisions, examined through the lens of my history. Some seemed to expect me to launch a crusade against any hint of impropriety. Others watched warily, perhaps fearing I'd find fault where none existed. Rather than address the whispers directly, I chose to lead through actions. I learned every Marine's name within 2 weeks. I joined their PT sessions, not as an observer, but as a participant. I ate in the enlisted mess hall regularly. I inspected the barracks personally, noting deficiencies and ensuring they were addressed promptly. Most importantly, I established absolute transparency around the company budget and resources. Monthly briefings detailed every dollar spent and why, every request approved or denied, and the reasoning behind each decision. When we received new equipment, the allocation process was explained clearly to all. Slowly, the wariness began to fade. Marines started coming to my office with real concerns rather than carefully worded inquiries. The artificial formality in interactions gave way to authentic communication. I wasn't just the captain who took down Reeves anymore. I was their commander, judged on my own merits. 4 months into my command, we received deployment orders, a 6-month rotation to Southeast Asia for joint exercises with allied nations. The preparation timeline was aggressive, requiring round-the-clock effort to ensure readiness. One evening, as I reviewed equipment requisitions in my office, a knock came at the door. "Enter," I called, not looking up from the paperwork. "Captain Lawson?" I recognized the voice immediately and raised my head in surprise. Chen? Staff Sergeant Diana Chen stood in my doorway, a smile spreading across her face. Reporting for duty, ma'am. I rose from my desk. You're assigned to Bravo Company? Just transferred in. I'll be taking over 2nd Platoon next week. For a moment, I was speechless. Chen, my former roommate, the person who had risked everything to help expose Reeves, would now be serving under my command. Staff Sergeant, I said formally, aware of protocols even in this unexpected reunion. Welcome to Bravo Company. Thank you, ma'am. Her posture was textbook perfect, but her eyes danced with suppressed laughter at our reversed positions. Once the door closed behind her, I shook my head in amazement. Staff Sergeant already? That's impressive, Chen. Not as impressive. As captain at 32, she countered. Looks like we both did all right. How have you been? I lost track after Lejeune. Good. Did a tour in Okinawa, then instructor duty at San Diego. Applied for the transfer here when I heard you were commanding Bravo. She grinned. Thought you might need someone to keep you honest. I laughed. Always. Then, growing serious. But you know it'll be different now. I can't show favoritism. I'd be disappointed if you did, Chen replied. I'm here as a staff sergeant, not as your friend. On duty, I expect nothing but professional treatment. And you'll get it. I smiled. Off duty is another matter. Our deployment to Southeast Asia proved challenging from the start. Logistical hurdles, language barriers with partner forces, and the region's unforgiving climate tested our preparation and adaptability. But Bravo Company performed exceptionally, drawing praise from senior officers and strengthening bonds with our allies. The true test came 3 months in, during joint night operations in mountainous terrain. 2nd Platoon, led by Staff Sergeant Chen, was operating independently when a sudden tropical storm hit. Flash flooding cut them off from the main element, washing out their primary extraction route. I was in the command center when the distress call came through, Chen's voice crackling over the radio. Bravo Actual, this is Bravo 2-1. We are cut off, repeat, cut off. Flash flood has taken out the eastern approach. 2 casualties, non-life-threatening. Request alternative extraction, over. My heart raced, but my voice remained steady. Bravo 2-1, this is Actual. Confirmed cutoff. Casualties status. Sprained ankle and possible concussion from debris Actual. Stable but immobile. I turned to the maps, working with our operations officer to identify alternatives. The flooding had eliminated the planned extraction routes, and air evacuation was impossible in the storm. The only viable option was a treacherous mountain pass that would add hours to their journey, hours they might not have if the flooding worsened. Bravo 2-1 Actual. New extraction route being transmitted to your GPS. Be advised, route classified high risk in current conditions. Chen's response was immediate. Understood, Actual. High risk acknowledged. I should have left it there, given the order and trusted my staff sergeant to execute it. But this wasn't just any staff sergeant. This was Chen, who had stood beside me when everyone else stepped back. Chen, who had risked her career to expose corruption. Bravo 2-1, I said, breaking protocol. I'm coming to you. Hold position. The operations officer looked at me in shock. Captain, with respect, that's not standard procedure. We have search and rescue teams for this. In this weather, they'll take hours to mobilize, I replied, already reaching for my gear. 2nd Platoon needs extraction now. At least take a team. That would slow me down. I know these mountains better than anyone here. I did training exercises in this exact region last year. It wasn't completely true. I'd had only basic familiarity with the area, but it was enough to justify my decision. Or so I told myself. The truth was simpler and more complicated. I couldn't send Chen and her Marines into danger without sharing it. Not after everything we'd been through. The journey was every bit as hazardous as expected. Driving rain reduced visibility to meters, turning mountain paths into treacherous mudslides. Twice I nearly lost my footing over steep drops. But 7 grueling hours later, I reached 2nd Platoon's position, a rocky overhang providing minimal shelter from the deluge. Chen's surprise at seeing me alone was evident, but she maintained professionalism in front of her Marines. Captain Lawson wasn't expecting a personal escort. Thought you could use an extra set of hands, Staff Sergeant. I surveyed the platoon, 20 Marines, soaked and exhausted, including the 2 casualties. Status report? While Chen briefed me, I assessed our options. The storm showed no signs of abating, and night was approaching. Attempting the mountain pass in darkness would be suicide. We'll establish camp here, I decided. First light movement to these coordinates. I showed Chen the map. There's a ridge high enough to be clear of flood zones. Air extraction can reach us there. Yes, ma'am. We set up a perimeter, distributed emergency rations, and established a watch rotation. As the Marines settled in, Chen and I found a moment of relative privacy checking the defensive positions. You shouldn't have come alone, she said quietly. It was unnecessary risk. I made a judgment call. A personal one, she countered. Would you have done the same for any platoon? The question hit home. Would I? I wanted to believe so, but couldn't be certain. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm here now and will get your people out safely. She studied me for a moment. You're still trying to save everyone yourself, aren't you? That's my job as commander. Part of your job, she corrected. The other part is trusting your people to handle situations they're trained for. The rebuke stung because it was justified. I'd let personal history influence a tactical decision, the very thing I'd sworn to avoid. You're right, I said finally. It won't happen again. Chen's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, the Marines are impressed. Not many commanders would hike 7 hours through a typhoon for a platoon in trouble. Just don't tell them I did it, because I was worried about you specifically. She smiled faintly. Your secret's safe with me, Captain. By morning, the storm had weakened enough for helicopter extraction. We guided the platoon to the ridge, where 2 CH-53s waited to transport us back to base. As we lifted off, I watched the flooded valleys below, aware of how easily the situation could have ended in tragedy. Back at Howe headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Harris was waiting, his expression unreadable. Captain Lawson, he said when we were alone in his office, explain to me why a company commander abandoned her post to personally rescue a single platoon. I stood at attention. No excuse, sir. I made an error in judgment. That's not what I asked. I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. I have history. With Staff Sergeant Chen, sir. We served together under Captain Reeves. She risked her career to help expose his corruption. When her platoon was in danger, I felt personally responsible. I see. Harris studied me for a long moment. Your actions were technically within your authority as commander. The rescue was successful. No additional casualties occurred. Yes, sir. But he continued. You allowed personal feelings to override tactical protocol? What if the company had faced another emergency while you were gone? I left Lieutenant Murray with full command authority. That's not the point. And you know it. Harris sighed. You're an exceptional officer, Lawson. Your Marines would follow you anywhere. That was evident from how quickly your search and rescue operation came together. But the best officers know when to lead from the front and when to trust the chain of command. I understand, sir. Do you? Because from where I stand, you're still fighting ghosts. Still trying to be the sergeant who saved everyone from Captain Reeves. His voice softened slightly. You're not that sergeant anymore. You're a company commander now, responsible for the whole, not just the parts. His words cut deeper than any reprimand could have, because they were true. What happens now, sir? I asked quietly. Now? You get some rest? Tomorrow you continue commanding your company. He paused. And you remember that the past is instructive, but it shouldn't be prescriptive. Learn from Reeves's failures without letting them define every decision you make. Yes, sir. Thanks. You, sir. As I left his office, the weight of his words settled on me. For 3 years, I'd been running from the shadow of Douglas Reeves, trying so hard to be his opposite that I'd sometimes lost sight of who I needed to be, myself. The realization was uncomfortable but necessary, like removing a splinter long buried in flesh, painful in the extraction, but essential for healing. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months, trying to make sense of my thoughts. The last line I wrote before sleep claimed me was simple but profound. The opposite of corruption isn't constant self-sacrifice. It's integrity, being whole, being consistent, being true to principles rather than personalities. It was a lesson long overdue, and one I wouldn't forget again. The remaining months of our deployment passed without major incident. Second Platoon's ordeal became part of company lore. That time the captain hiked through a typhoon, but I ensured the focus remained on the platoon's resilience rather than my involvement. Chen and I maintained strict professionalism on duty, though occasional off-duty coffee allowed our friendship to rebuild on new terms, as peers with different responsibilities rather than comrades in a shared battle. Upon returning to Camp Pendleton, Bravo Company received commendations for outstanding performance during the deployment. The recognition reflected the unit's achievements, but I took particular pride in knowing we'd accomplished it all with complete transparency and integrity. No shortcuts, no hidden agendas, no special treatment. 18. Months into my command, I received unexpected news. I was being considered for major, well ahead of the usual timeline. Lieutenant Colonel Harris called me to his office to deliver the information personally. "Your file's been flagged for early promotion board review," he said without preamble. "Someone up the chain thinks you're ready for greater responsibility." I sat speechless for a moment. "That's surprising, sir." "Is it? Your company has the highest readiness ratings in the battalion. Retention rates are up. Disciplinary issues are down." He smiled slightly. "And you've demonstrated the moral courage required at higher levels of command." "The Reeves case," I said, understanding dawning. "Initially, yes. That got you noticed. But your performance since then is what's put you on this track." He leaned forward. "The board meets next month. Before then, there's something you should know." "Sir?" "General Hayes is chairing the promotion board." Hayes. The name instantly transported me back to that pivotal moment, standing at attention in Reeves's office, uttering those fateful words, "Family, remember?" and Hayes overhearing everything. "I see," I said carefully. "Do you think that will affect the decision?" Harris shrugged. "Hayes sponsored your OCS application, but he's known for being scrupulously fair. Your record will speak for itself." He paused. "However, there is one complication." "What's that, sir?" "If selected for major, you'd be reassigned, likely to headquarters as operations officer." He studied me. "How do you feel about leaving Bravo Company?" This question hit harder than I expected. I'd grown attached to this unit, these Marines. Watching them develop, overcome challenges, become a cohesive team, it had been the most rewarding experience of my career. "Mixed feelings," I admitted. "I love commanding Bravo, but if I can serve the Corps better elsewhere," Harris nodded approvingly. "That's the right answer. Always mission first." As the promotion board date approached, I found myself increasingly reflective. My path from enlisted sergeant to company commander had been unusual, shaped by a confrontation I never sought. If promoted to major, I'd be entering the upper echelons of leadership, making policies rather than just implementing them. The week before the board convened, I received a visitor I never expected to see again. "Captain Lawson," my adjutant announced. "There's a Mr. Kyle Grant here to see you. No appointment." Kyle Grant, Reeves's nephew, the beneficiary of my stolen bonus. The young man whose Hawaiian vacation had set everything in motion. "Send him in," I said, curiosity overcoming my initial hesitation. The Kyle Grant who entered my office bore little resemblance to the smirking face from Instagram posts. This man appeared older than his years, his expression serious, almost haunted. "Captain Lawson," he began awkwardly. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Mr. Grant?" He shifted uncomfortably. I owe you an apology, a long overdue one." I gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Mr. Grant." He sat, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I didn't know," he said after a moment. "About the money, your bonus. Uncle Doug told me the trip was a reward for enlisting, that it was all above board." "You were very young," I acknowledged, studying him. "What happened after the court-martial?" "I was discharged. Not dishonorably, but my name was Mud." He looked down. "My family, my father's side, they blamed me for Uncle Doug's downfall. Said if I hadn't posted those pictures on Instagram, they blamed the evidence, not the crime," I observed. "Exactly." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "It took me years to understand what really happened. To see that my uncle used me to steal from you. That he betrayed everything the Corps stands for. Why come tell me this now?" Kyle took a deep breath. "I'm applying to college. Criminal justice program. I want to understand ethics, accountability, everything my uncle ignored." He hesitated. "And I heard you might be on the promotion board list. I wanted you to know that at least one member of the Reeves family recognizes what you did was right." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a calculated move or an attempt to curry favor. This was a young man trying to make amends, to find his own path. "Thank you for coming," I said finally. "That couldn't have been easy." "Easier than what you did," he replied. "Standing up to a superior officer, risking your career for what's right, that took real courage." After he left, I sat for a long time, turning the conversation over in my mind. 3 years ago, Kyle Grant had been a symbol of everything wrong with the system. Nepotism, privilege, the bending of rules for the connected. Now he was just a young man trying to rebuild his life, another casualty of Reeves's corruption. The cycle of resentment I'd carried, not just toward Reeves, but toward the system that had initially protected him, felt suddenly lighter, less consuming. Kyle's visit had provided an unexpected form of closure, a reminder that people could change, learn, grow, beyond their worst mistakes. 2 days later, I received a message to report to General Hayes's office, an unusual directive that set my nerves on edge. The promotion board wasn't scheduled to convene until the following week. Hayes's office at division headquarters was spartanly functional, much as I remembered it from years earlier. The general himself had aged visibly, his hair now completely silver, lines deeper around his eyes, but his posture remained ramrod straight, his gaze just as penetrating. "Captain Lawson," he greeted me, rising from behind his desk. "Please, sit down." "Thank you, sir." I sat, maintaining parade rest posture even in the chair. Hayes studied me for a moment. "You've done well for yourself, Captain. The reports from your deployment were exemplary. Lieutenant, Colonel Harris speaks highly of your leadership." "Thank you, sir." "You're wondering why I called you here before the promotion board meets?" "Yes, sir." Hayes leaned back in his chair. "I wanted to speak with you privately, without the formality of the board setting." He paused. 3 years ago, you stood in an office not far from here and made a decision that changed your life. And, in many ways, changed the core. "The Reeves case," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Yes." Hayes nodded. "That case became a watershed moment in our ongoing efforts to combat corruption and abuse of power. It's studied at the War College now, analyzed by officers trying to understand ethical leadership under pressure." I hadn't known that, and wasn't sure how to respond. What many of them don't understand, Hayes continued, is the personal cost. Standing against corruption isn't an abstract concept when it's your commanding officer, your bonus, your future on the line. "No, sir, it isn't." Which brings me to the reason for this meeting. Hayes leaned forward, folding his hands on his desk. "The promotion board will almost certainly select you for major. Your record justifies it. But before that happens, I wanted to ask you a question. Why do you want this promotion?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. I'd prepared to discuss my record, my accomplishments, my leadership philosophy, standard promotion board material. I hadn't expected to defend my motivation. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Always." I considered my answer carefully. 3 years ago, I confronted Captain Reeves because he violated the trust placed in him, not just by me, but by every Marine under his command. He used his position for personal gain at others' expense. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I want this promotion because I believe leadership should serve those being led. Because every level up the chain of command carries greater responsibility to maintain the integrity of the system. Because the higher I go, the more Marines I can influence. Not just through orders, but through example. Hayes's expression remained unreadable. "And if you faced another Reeves situation? Another ethical challenge that put your career at risk?" "I'd like to think I'd make the same choice, sir, but with less hesitation this time." For the first time, Hayes smiled slightly. "Good. Answer, Captain." He rose, signaling our meeting was concluding. "The board convenes Monday. I look forward to reviewing your file with my colleagues." As I left division headquarters, I felt strangely at peace. Whatever the board decided, I knew my path forward. The promotion would be an opportunity to serve more effectively, not a validation of my worth or redemption for past struggles. The following week passed in a blur of regular duties. I deliberately avoided discussing the promotion possibility with anyone in the company, focusing instead on training schedules, equipment maintenance, and personnel issues. On Friday afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel Harris summoned me to his office. His expression gave nothing away as I reported. "Captain Lawson," he began formally, "I've received the results of the promotion board." I braced myself, maintaining a neutral expression. "Congratulations, Major Lawson." He extended his hand, breaking into a rare smile. Effective immediately. Relief and pride washed through me. "Thank you, sir. The formal ceremony will be next week. Your family is welcome to attend." "Just my brother, sir. He'll be pleased." Harris nodded, then handed me an envelope. This came with the promotion notice. Personal letter from General Hayes. Later, alone in my office, I opened the envelope with careful fingers. The letter inside was brief but powerful. "Major Lawson, 3 years ago, I overheard a sergeant speak truth to power with a simple question. Family, remember? Today, as you accept these new responsibilities, I ask you to remember a different definition of family, the one you've demonstrated throughout your career. A bond based on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and unwavering integrity. The core is changing, slowly but surely. Leaders like you are the catalyst for that change. Never forget the sergeant you were, even as you embrace the officer you've become. Semper Fidelis, General Robert Hayes. My eyes blurred as I finished reading. The letter captured everything I'd tried to embody since that confrontation with Reeves. The belief that true leadership served something larger than self-interest or personal advancement. That evening, I walked through the barracks one last time as Bravo Company's commander. Marines snapped to attention as I passed, but I waved them to ease. This wasn't an inspection. It was a farewell, though they didn't know it yet. In the squad bay, I paused to observe a group of young Marines helping each other prepare for the next day's inspection, checking uniforms, practicing drill movements, quizzing each other on procedures. Not because an NCO was watching, but because they cared about each other's success. This, I realized, was the true meaning of family in the Corps. Not blood ties or special favors, but the willingness to lift others alongside yourself, to sacrifice personal comfort for collective good, to hold each other accountable to a higher standard. In that moment, watching these Marines, my Marines, I felt the full circle of my journey. From the sergeant standing alone against corruption to the commander fostering a culture of integrity, the path had been challenging but undeniably worth it. My phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Heard the news. Major Lawson has a nice ring to it. I smiled, typing back. Thanks to people like you who stood beside me when it mattered. Her response came quickly. Just returning the favor. You taught me what it means to do what's right, regardless of rank or cost. As I left the barracks that night, the setting sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton, the same base where my confrontation with Reeves had occurred, where my journey from sergeant to major had begun. But the place felt different now. Or perhaps I was the one who had changed. The next morning, I would gather the company and announce my promotion and reassignment. I would thank them for their service, their dedication, their trust. I would introduce their new commander and express confidence in their continued success. But tonight, in the quiet of my quarters, I allowed myself a moment of reflection on the words that had changed everything. Family, remember? Reeves had meant it as an exclusion, a reminder of my outsider status. But in the years since, I'd discovered a profound truth. Family wasn't defined by blood or background or special access. It was built through shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to something larger than oneself. As a major, I would have new responsibilities, new challenges, new opportunities to shape the Corps I loved. But the lesson that had brought me to this point would remain my guiding principle. Leadership wasn't about privilege, it was about service. Not about taking, but about giving. Not about dividing people into insiders and outsiders, but about creating a culture where everyone belonged. That was family. That was honor. That was the Corps at its best. And I would never forget it.